The United Arab Emirates, long regarded as one of the most stable financial hubs in the Middle East, is now exploring a potential financial backstop from the United States as conflict with Iran begins to disrupt its core economic channels. Behind closed doors in Washington, discussions are taking place around a mechanism that could unlock billions of dollars in emergency liquidity. The significance lies not only in the request itself, but in what it reveals about the resilience of Gulf economies when exposed to sustained geopolitical and military pressure. At the center of these talks is UAE Central Bank Governor Khaled Mohamed Balama, who recently met US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent along with Federal Reserve officials. The proposal being considered is a currency swap line, a financial arrangement that allows central banks to exchange domestic currency for US dollars at relatively low cost. This tool is typically deployed during periods of global financial stress and has historically been limited to major advanced economies. Its consideration in the UAE context indicates both the seriousness of current risks and the strategic importance of maintaining stability in the Gulf. The origins of this situation are rooted in the geopolitical dynamics of the region. The Gulf has long been shaped by tensions involving Iran and its regional counterparts, with the Strait of Hormuz acting as a critical choke point for global energy flows. Under normal conditions, approximately 20% of the world's oil supply transits through this narrow passage. Since late February, disruptions linked to Iranian actions have constrained shipping activity, reducing the UAE's ability to export oil. Simultaneously, reported airstrikes have damaged elements of the country's oil and gas infrastructure, amplifying the economic impact. These developments intensified after US President Donald Trump aligned militarily with Israel in the ongoing conflict with Iran. For the UAE, this alignment has created a dual exposure. On one side, it increases the likelihood of retaliatory actions targeting its territory or infrastructure. On the other, it ties the country's strategic positioning more closely to US policy decisions. This combination introduces uncertainty into financial markets, where stability and predictability are key determinants of investor behavior. The structure of the UAE's monetary system further explains the urgency. The dirham is pegged to the US dollar, which requires the central bank to maintain sufficient dollar reserves to defend the exchange rate. When export revenues decline due to disrupted oil shipments, those reserves become the primary buffer. If the strain persists, maintaining the peg could require significant intervention. A currency swap line with the US Federal Reserve would provide immediate access to dollar liquidity, effectively reinforcing the central bank's capacity to stabilize the currency during periods of stress. However, extending such a facility is not straightforward. From the perspective of US policymakers, particularly within the Federal Open Market Committee, swap lines are typically justified when instability in one economy poses a risk of spilling over into the broader global financial system. Existing arrangements are concentrated among major economies such as the United Kingdom, Japan, and the European Union. While the Gulf's role in energy markets is substantial, there remains internal debate in Washington about whether this meets the threshold required for extending similar support to the UAE. In parallel, the UAE has taken steps to diversify its options. Earlier in the month, it established a currency swap arrangement valued at approximately $5 billion with Bahrain. This move reflects an effort to build regional financial resilience and reduce reliance on external actors. Nevertheless, the scale of potential losses resulting from prolonged disruption in oil exports is significantly larger. The UAE's economic model depends on continuous capital inflows, efficient trade logistics, and a strong perception of safety. Any sustained disruption risks undermining these foundations. Regional assessments reinforce the view that recovery will not be immediate. Mohamed Al-Jadaan has indicated that even in the event of a rapid end to hostilities, logistical challenges alone could delay normalization for several months. Factors such as tanker availability, insurance premiums, and port operations have already been affected. These constraints extend the economic impact beyond the duration of active conflict, creating a lag in recovery that complicates planning and forecasting. If the situation deteriorates further, one scenario involves a prolonged disruption of the Strait of Hormuz, combined with continued infrastructure damage. In such a case, the UAE could face accelerated depletion of its foreign reserves. Policy responses might include tightening domestic liquidity, adjusting fiscal priorities, or seeking broader international assistance. Financial markets would likely respond with increased volatility, potentially leading to capital outflows and higher borrowing costs. This would place additional pressure on both the banking system and the broader economy. An alternative scenario involves stabilization of the conflict alongside the approval of external support mechanisms such as a US swap line. In this case, access to dollar liquidity would serve as a stabilizing signal to global markets. Investor confidence could gradually return, allowing capital flows to normalize and enabling the UAE to absorb short-term disruptions without long-term structural damage. The effectiveness of this outcome would depend on both the timing and the scale of the support provided. The implications extend beyond national boundaries. The Gulf region is central to global energy supply chains, and disruptions in this area influence pricing, availability, and strategic reserves worldwide. A sustained interruption would affect not only energy importing economies, but also broader industrial and financial systems that rely on stable input costs. At the same time, the increasing use of financial instruments such as swap lines highlights how economic policy tools are becoming integral to managing geopolitical risk. This situation illustrates a convergence of military conflict, financial strategy, and institutional coordination. The UAE's engagement with the United States is not simply about accessing liquidity. It represents a broader test of how existing global financial frameworks respond to regional crises that carry systemic implications. The outcome will provide insight into the flexibility of these mechanisms and the willingness of major economies to extend support beyond established partners. As developments continue, several variables will shape the trajectory. The duration and intensity of disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz will directly affect export capacity. The extent of damage to energy infrastructure will influence recovery timelines. Equally important is the stance of US policymakers regarding financial support mechanisms and whether they expand their scope in response to evolving risks.